I've always been interested in art. My mom would say I was born drawing. I scribbled on everything. I'm a doodler. You know how some people are singers and they can't not sing. Well, I'm a doodler. If I'm sitting anywhere with a pencil or paper, I doodle. It's something I've always been interested in. I was directed to go into architecture because when you're in junior high, they test you for skills or whatever, and I was interested in both science and art, so they thought that turned into architecture. I did that. I studied that. I worked as an architect for a while and couldn't take it anymore. I just wasn't suited for that, and I told Joe, my husband, after I'd been out of school, architecture school, for about 8 years, I said, I'm going back to art school and you're going to support me. And he put up with that. And so I've been painting more or less ever since then. But I'm interested in all aspects of painting, the history, the various media that you can use. I like to think of myself as a painter's painter in that I really enjoy the medium of paint and what all it can do. So I've been painting when I need more money. I go do architecture, architectural drafting for people, and but mostly I paint and or think about painting or read about painting. When my parents saw, my mom was very artistic also. When she saw that I had an ability, there was a local neighborhood woman who taught painting lessons, and she sent me there. And we started out with acrylic, but I probably the fumes. But in the winter we did acrylic, in the summer we did oils or watercolor. She'd take us out. So there I got exposed to three different media, three different types of paint. And oil, you can do so much with it. You could probably do a lot with acrylic, but one thing I have never figured out is acrylic dries a different color than what you mix. Oil paint doesn't do that, and that just freaks me out. I can't. People can do that and they can match it, and it's a skill, but it's one that I don't have. So if I were just sitting down doing the whole thing in one shot, I could do an acrylic painting, but to come back and revisit it and have to match that color again, I don't think I have that ability, and I really respect those who do. So I just like oil because of the various things. I can apply it thinly, thickly. I can manipulate it with various tools, and it's just really almost infinitely variable in what you can do to the surface. Well, my first impression and why I was so enamored with Lake Superior was it was the first time we came up here on vacation and we stayed by Lake Superior the whole time, and just the horizon line, and it was the flat earth kind of, and I don't mean that in the way flat earth society people now, but just there was a line and it was the one color above and one color below. And to go back a little bit, in art school I established myself as kind of the person who played with the colors when they're adjacent to one another, because you can really affect how you perceive a color by what you put it next to. And so that's what the lake does automatically. And I was like, wow, I have this infinitely variable thing to look at and work from. But that's also a real distant horizon line. That's a perspective. And then I think I've kind of, just the way I paint was thickly, it started reminding me of topography. And I just like, I'm just going to do a topography, take a topographic map, an actual one, and reinterpret it as a painting. And then sometimes I just liked playing with it. And so that's the imagined one. So in this show, there are imagined ones, and being in Bear Lake, two of my favorite hikes on the Superior Hiking Trail along the shore. They're real and imagined, but it's the way I want to work for a while, and it's a different perspective. It's an aerial perspective, and I kind of want to overlay the two, and I don't really know what that means. There's a few of them in this show that do that, and then once again using the medium to kind of emphasize that. So the painting that kind of was the seed painting, and that's what I call a painting that has a new idea that starts. It's the fork in the road, the unexpected detour. But there's the large one called Sea Smoke, and the way I painted the sea smoke shapes they just became topographic maps because I would hold each layer back from the edge. And for those who are familiar with reverse applique and quilting, it's kind of the same appearance. Or there's a Central American textiles called mola, which really influenced me, and that's a whole other story. But the surface is the top edge of the surface of the painting, and then it kind of goes down like little canyons into it. And so I build the paintings that way. Anyway, Sea Smoke was the first one that addressed the horizon and this shape of kind of contours. And from there, I was off to the races. Sun Sparkle After Image is another one. Fractured Ice is another one. And then that explore both the horizon, the linear perspective of the horizon, and the aerial perspective of a topography map. And Forest Aerial. Those are the main ones in this one that I would have people look at. When you really look at nature a lot, there's more than just the obvious. And I could get on a whole rant about how landscapes are not appreciated because everybody thinks they know them. They're familiar with the land, and they aren't. They may be one little patch, but just pay attention. Pay attention to the colors. Pay attention to the smells and the sounds. What's causing that? Because you're in a unique time in history, for yourself and for the world. This is as good as it's probably going to get, whatever. And I don't mean to be a downer as an environmentalist, but just this is it. We don't have another place to go. And people don't respect the land, and I think they don't respect landscape painting. And that's what I love about this venue and Grand Marais in general, is people do love the land and they love landscape painting, not as like, oh, it's a pretty picture, but there's a spiritual component or a deeper component that is, I don't have to translate it for people here. And I really respect and appreciate that in the audience here. I'm a very rigorous, strict taskmaster about painting instruction. I would suggest if you just want to dabble, ask yourself why you want to dabble. Do you want to play with color? Do you want to play with line? Because a lot of people, I think, I see them painting and getting frustrated, and I think they'd be happier if they were doing drawing. They want to make the shape and the form and the composition more than they want to mess with the color. So my advice would be, get a little bit of drawing skills. You can draw with paint too, but if you really want to do color, then dive in. But don't paint your dog or a bowl of fruit. Don't paint, your family at Thanksgiving dinner sitting. Don't paint. Like, I think a lot of people bite off too much and they get frustrated, and they need to not do that. They need to figure out how they need to learn to mix color and just how to handle the paint. Because different brushes, and that's what my work experiments with, is just all the different ways you can apply paint and how differently it can look. And so that's kind of advanced, but you need to know that as a beginner that you're diving off into a lot of different decision making. I rarely use brushes because I hate cleaning them. I know that sounds whatever, but if you've ever really tried to get an expensive paintbrush clean, you can spend a half hour. You can use it for 5 minutes and then spend a half hour getting it clean. I use things called painting knives, which most people are familiar with a palette knife. Painting knives are just more flexy. They're usually come in a bunch of different sizes, so you can get in really tight. I have a thing there's called paint shapers, and they're basically the same material, I think, as a silicone spatulas you see everywhere. I've actually used those. But I don't use paint that much unless I need a real tight line or something. I mean, paint brushes that much. And yeah, that's pretty much the tools I use, painting knives. And I've had the same knives since art school, since my mom bought me a set after I graduated art school because she saw how much I loved them, and I'm still using them. And she bought me some spare ones, and I haven't even opened those yet. They're, I think I'm getting up there in age. I better, I don't need to save these for another 30 years, but whatever. So
they're precious.
They're precious.
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
And they're really expensive now too. So, like everything else.
Sorry. Awesome.